I mean, this was a book that is teaching people how to cook the way that I learned how to cook. So it's basically the way I learned how to cook in book form, because I think learning to cook is slightly different from rote learning. It's not follow these recipes exactly and then you know how to cook that dish and then do the next one and the next one. There's, if you've ever been in the kitchen with your grandma or your mum, it's far less about a teaspoon of that and a tablespoon of that. It's like, look for this, you know, when it's this brown it should be coming out, or look for that little jiggle on the top of a cake or something. That it's those little tips and tricks and hints that really teach you about the food that you're making rather than just teach you a recipe. The 5 basic tastes are salty, sweet, sour, bitter and umami, and they're so important for cooking. And we spend a lot of time thinking about flavouring. We think about cumin going together with mint, or chili going together with rosemary, just say they did. But for me, I think that that's good to know, it's nice and interesting, but the basis of cooking good food is about the taste of it, and that's seasoning rather than flavouring. So how salty something is, how sweet something is, how sour something is, how bitter or umami it might be, and getting that in balance is always going to make you give you good food at the end of it. Texture is really important in cooking, because if you think about it, if you look at the flavour of something or the texture of something and how important that is, I'd say it's roughly 55% texture, 45% flavour. And whenever I say that to people, they're always like, oh, no, Adam, you've got it so wrong. But if you think about, say, the difference between fresh bread and stale bread, they're the same flavour. You haven't added anything or taken anything away to change the flavour of that. The only thing that's different is the texture. If you like your steak rare, and somebody else likes it well done, the only difference between a rare and a well done steak is the texture of it. So if I'm coming up with a new recipe, I tend to think about texture more than I think about flavour. And so much of Asian cooking is about texture, trying to get that balance of crunchiness and softness, or you know, if you have a slow braised pork, for example, like a dongpo pork, if that's chewy and bitey rather than melting and falling apart, it's a completely wrong dish. So you've really got to pay attention to texture, even just down to how you cut your vegetables. If you finely dice a vegetable or cut it into big chunks, that the difference there has nothing to do with the flavour of it, it's just the texture of it, and it's really important to know how to do that properly. I think it would just be to uncomplicate it. Easier to said than done. But I think that if you're not confident in a cuisine, you tend to think it's more complicated than it is. So you have, say, a stir fry, and you put 12 different vegetables into a stir fry. When I was growing up, my grandma made stir fried dishes all the time, and they would have 2 vegetables in it, or 1 vegetable and no vegetables at all. And the way I describe it is a bit like painting a picture. If you're a painter and you've got all these different colours in your palette and you mix them all together every time you want to paint a picture, every picture's the same shade of brown, you know. And individual vegetables and meats and seafoods all have great flavours. You don't need to mix every single one together just to get great flavour out of it. You want your stir-fried dish, if it's beef and broccoli, you want it to taste of beef and broccoli. If it's chicken and ginger, you want it to taste like chicken and ginger, not chicken and ginger and eggplant and snow pea and carrot and all of these other things that we want to throw in there. So if there is one thing that I think that we need to do in Australia about Asian food, it's just simplify it, and that's quite literally the easiest thing we can do.